It is official. Read level 1, 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
Building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC7 News.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, we'll talk travel as international restrictions eased up just in time for the holidays. Also, we'll get into the Let's Go Brandon viral trend that's still making headlines. But first, the aftermath of the Astroworld festival after 8 people died rushing the stage during Travis Scott's concert, all young people between 14 and 27 years old. Tragic beyond belief. There are so many questions for which we need to get answers. So joining us now to talk about this is Paul Wertheimer, founder of the Crowd Management Strategies consulting firm. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kristen.
You've been campaigning for safe concert environments for decades. Was this a clearly unsafe environment from the get-go, you think?
This was a classic kind of crowd crush situation and crowds craze that occurs historically at concerts and festivals.
All right. How so? How is it classic? Is it the size? Is it the age of the audience? Is it the singer himself?
It's the crowd environment in which fans are placed, the lack of management, the type of crowd configuration, festival seating, which is the most dangerous and deadly in rock and roll history, and it contains a crowd dynamic extraordinarily dangerous to crowd craze when people move en masse towards something of perceived value, like the artist. They want to be close to the artist. They want to touch the artist. They want a piece of cloth from the artist. Mm-hmm. This is an extraordinarily dangerous situation that throughout rock and roll history has caused death and injuries, just like on Friday.
Yeah, but that underscores the point that many concerts have that crowd crush potential, right? You have mosh pits at a lot of punk and rock concerts. You always have the swaying crowds that tend to move towards the performer when the headline is about to start. So was there something in particular, though, about this concert and the setup that you've seen that made it extra risky, if you will?
Well, it's Russian roulette. I've spent 20 years in concerts, and including shows in San Francisco. I've spent all that time in crowd crush festival seating. First place I go is in front of the stage, in front of the band singer's mic, and that's where I plant myself because that's one of the most dangerous areas of it. So when you say, yes, there's always been this problem, that means there's always been this reckless planning of crowds. And people, it's just that sometimes it's Russian roulette, mm-hmm. and everything goes wrong and people die. But everybody's been on notice that this is dangerous. When you're pulling out a 16-year-old girl from the front of the stage, why is that acceptable? Why concert after concert, Lollapalooza, Tibetan Freedom Festival, Woodstock 99, excuse me, thousands of deaths and rapes in front of the stage. 1991, AC/DC at the Salt Palace, 3 dead, 2 14-year-olds and a 17-year-old. The Who concert tragedy, 11 dead, only 4 were not teenagers. I could go on and on. Denmark, Pearl Jam, 2000, 9 dead in almost a copycat incident mm-hmm. that you had in Houston. This was never acceptable. What happened to cause this tragedy? Lack of monitoring the crowd, as usual, lack of managing the crowd, lack of reducing the density. Young people are trying to come out of a pandemic. They're trying to live their life, enjoy their youth. Everybody is extra hyped. Right. And then the artist just adds to it. And you put all that together, you mix it, that's the cocktail you get.
I see. All the ingredients are always there at other concerts as well, but because of those factors you cited, it was just an added dimension, even more so, if you will. But I want to ask you about reports coming out of this particular concert that people were feeling pricks in their neck like they were injected with some unknown drug. Have you ever heard of that before, or does that actually happen more often than we realize?
No, it rarely ever happens. And I don't know if that's, an attempt to deflect one of the attempts to deflect responsibility from the parties involved. I mean, people have been pricked or stabbed. We don't know who those people are. They haven't been identified. They haven't spoken. We haven't seen the blood tests. Let's see if there are actually any objects, opiates or others, that might have entered these people's, including the security guard system, that are similar. It's just conjecture at this time. We don't know anything. It's just some story to suggest that maybe the tragedy wasn't the result of those who planned, managed, and profited from it.
All right. Well, here's another factor that I'm going to throw at you, and I realize we don't know all the details, but people are talking about how Travis Scott has told the crowd before in the past at other performances to rush the stage. We don't know if he specifically said that to this crowd, but is that pattern or that behavior in the past important in determining liability or culpability this time?
It's not only important there, Kristen, it's important deciding whether that event should have ever occurred. The first thing you do when organizers want to plan an event, if they do it right, is a risk assessment. That risk assessment lists all the hazards and dangers and risks that might occur: bad weather, stage collapse, drugs, shootings, crowd crush. In that risk assessment, they then profile the entertainment that is going to come. Has that entertainment caused problems in the past at events? What problems were they? How are we going to mitigate that or stop it? Is the crowd that's coming problematic? Do they have a history? You go through, can we mitigate that and or stop it? That's where you identify Travis Scott's background and decide if you want to do the show. Now the police, everybody's running around. Look at Travis Scott. Look at Travis Scott's history. They knew or should have known that day one before they decided even to do the event. I'm not an apologist for Travis Scott. I will tell you this. I think he's being made the scapegoat. He's not, in my opinion, he's not the only one who has culpability here. In my opinion, you've got to look at the organizers, the people who planned the event, managed it, profited, and approved it.
So given that, though, I understand you're saying plenty of responsibility and blame to go around, but petitions to, Coachella right now to cancel the Travis Scott concert, do you think that is a good idea?
Well, I mean, a Travis Scott concert can be run safely if it's run correctly. If he stays within reason and doesn't wind up to the crowd until it spins out of control, Travis Scott, can be done in reserved seating if he wanted, I don't, other than that, I'm just saying his shows could be made safe.
I mean, Coachella, one big giant field, don't know how that would play out, but certainly, hopefully after this incident, there will be a lot more planning involved, no matter who the headliner is. Do you also think perhaps the Travis Scott concert should have been stopped when they noticed some people passing out? There's video showing people chanting "Stop the concert" as someone passed out, but the performer continued. I wonder if you think that should be standard operating procedure, because it seems like other artists also keep going as well, but perhaps they call a little more attention and pause a little bit to whoever passed out.
The concert should have been stopped and reorganized at the front of the stage, managed correctly before it went over the cliff, before people started facing critical injuries. It should have been any crowd management expert monitoring that event. If anybody even monitored the crowd, could have seen tragedy building. Could have seen when you're pulling people over the barricade. And look, as I said, I spent 20 years in these crowd crush situations. I know it happens all the time. People think it's fun because they think there's a safety net, but that's a sign of danger. When there's crowd surges beginning, they should have stopped the concert well in advance to get control of the front of the stage and then gone forward.
Because once you're in the middle of a surge, it's like being in the middle of a rip current in the ocean. There's really nothing you can do about it. You have no control whatsoever, which is why I'm going to end with asking you if you can give some safety tips to concert goers.
Well, there are, look, my firm is famous for crowd safety tips on how to get out of a crowd crush. The guidance is worldwide and accepted. But when you get past that point where you can't escape, there's little you can do. There's some possibility options, but if you've been in a crowd crush, you're being crushed. You can't move your arms if you haven't lifted them up. You have no control of your feet or legs. You have no control of your body. But at least I want to mention two things that are very important that buy you time in a terrible crowd crush like this. Don't yell and scream, because nobody can hear you past 3 feet, and if they can, they can't help you. What you want to do is conserve your oxygen. And the other thing is, don't fight the crowd surge. It's thousands of pounds of pressure. Try to let it pass through you. Absorb as much as you can to keep standing, but you need to keep your strength. And the third thing really is pray that you've got enough time to be saved.
All right. Useful tips for us. Paul Wertheimer, founder of the Crowd Management Strategies consulting firm. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Take care.
My pleasure, Kristen. Bye.
All right, big news today as international travel restrictions ease. We have some questions, and if you have travel-related questions, ask them now on our live streams, and we'll get some answers for you after the break.
In commercial break.
All right. So, hello, everybody. Hope you had a good weekend. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the easing of the international travel restrictions lifted. But you're probably wondering, well, what exactly does it take for an international traveler to come into the U.S. now? We'll get into that conversation in about 1 minute, so don't go anywhere. Let's do this.
5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
The U.S. is relaxing its border restrictions for international travelers. That means international travelers can now come to the U.S. if they're fully vaccinated and have a negative COVID test within 3 days of travel. Joining us now to talk about that and answer your travel-related questions, Henry Hartefeld, an air travel industry analyst at Atmosphere Research Group based here in San Francisco. Thank you so much, Henry, for joining us.
Good afternoon.
I want to be absolutely clear about the new rules of entry. Is it proof of vaccination plus negative COVID test? It's not one or the other, right, for leisure travelers?
Correct. Whether you're coming to the US for business or leisure, you have to have a negative COVID test and be fully vaccinated. That means your vaccinations, all doses of your vaccinations must be done at least 2 weeks before your trip to the US. And of course, you have to comply with other rules, such as wearing a mask on the airplane and at the airport.
Is there an allowance for saying I'm not vaccinated yet, but I intend to do it once I arrive here in the U.S.?
Yes. So if you are, under the age of 18, you do not have to be vaccinated, but you do have to show a negative COVID test.
Okay.
If you are not vaccinated and you are over 18, you have to have a negative COVID test, and you have to take a test within 24 hours of arrival in the U.S. and then upload it to, I believe it's the CDC.
Okay. How about tourists arriving by land, like from Mexico or Canada, or those arriving by boat? Do they also
Well,
need
it's
vaccine
interesting.
proof?
If you're
Is it the same
flying
rules?
in, yeah, if you're flying from Canada or Mexico, for example, you have to have both the vaccination and negative COVID test. If you're traveling across the border by car, or if you are sailing into the U.S., you only have to have the vaccinations. You do not have to have the negative COVID test.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. How does this new protocol compare to other countries' restrictions? Part of the criticism on the U.S. was that while European countries welcomed Americans back, the U.S. had not reciprocated.
Well, Kristen, in terms of what's required, it's fairly consistent. In fact, I've done 2 trips to Europe since August. But the U.S. was slow in reopening, arguably too slow in reopening, since many places, especially in Europe, have had higher vaccination rates. What matters is today is the beginning of unlocking the world, welcoming more of the world back to the U.S. So it is better late than never. And as an analyst, I'm very happy to see the U.S. welcome international travelers here today.
Yeah, and you're based here in San Francisco, so I want to ask you how important you think this is to the Bay Area local economy.
It's hugely important. International visitors, whether they are leisure or business people, are bringing in billions of dollars worth of spending. It's not just the airfare, it's the money that they spend at hotels, on taxis, at restaurants, at stores, catering, audiovisual, anything and everything you can imagine that a traveler might need, whether they're, again, here for business or leisure. International visitors tend to stay longer than a traveler from the US when they visit the Bay Area, and they spend more money while they're here. So they have an extremely important role in helping to jumpstart our economy and keep it humming.
I see. All right. Hey, Barbara, our viewer, has a really good question that she posed on Facebook Live. She wants to know, does it matter which vaccine the person from abroad entering the U.S. got? That's interesting because, you know, there are a lot of other vaccines that people got overseas that are not necessarily approved here. What does the rule say about that?
Yeah, so basically any vaccination that is approved by the World Health Organization will be recognized by the US. The details are contained on the CDC's website, and I would encourage people to double check that. There are a couple of vaccinations that the WHO has not approved or does not recognize. Those are not valid for travel to the US.
All right. Which visitors from which countries do you expect to come back and visit us and take advantage of this new rule first? I'm thinking in my mind perhaps not Asian tourists, because when they return to their own countries, they're still mostly subjected to long quarantine. So can you talk about where you might see the influx?
Yeah, so basically the US is now open to actually more than 100 countries. That's what's so interesting. The restrictions that have been eased in some cases were already eased for certain travelers. There are, however, some countries that cannot come in, where their citizens cannot come to the US. There are also places where the US, even though we're welcoming people from some of these countries, for example, China, we're not yet welcome to go there. So there are a few countries in Europe that are not allowed, and I believe Japan may be on the list, and some other countries in Southeast Asia.
All right, so better check with the State Department website before you.
Check with the Department of State or check with that country's consulate or embassy.
Okay, thank you. I want to shift gears a little bit here because, as you know, there's been a recent surge in cancellations by multiple carriers traveling domestically. It's really causing a lot of fear and worries amongst holiday travelers. First of all, what caused those mass cancellations? And I know staffing is one of those factors, wondering if that's stabilized. What can you tell us?
Well, what caused some of the cancellations recently at Southwest and American, which were the two most widely publicized events, were small bits of bad weather that just cascaded out of control. It was compounded by the airlines having too many flights scheduled and not enough pilots and flight attendants ready to fly. The good news is that in American's case, more than 1,800 flight attendants rejoined the airline's ranks on the 1st of November. An additional 600 American flight attendants go back on the line during December. Plus, the airline is hiring more new flight attendants. In addition, they're bringing back pilots. Same with Southwest Airlines. Another complication that people were worried about, including me, was the federal vaccination mandate, which originally would require all airline employees to be vaccinated by November 24th, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Not a good day to have a deadline. That date has been pushed back to early January. So I think we are set to have a better Thanksgiving than we expected. Of course, bad weather is simply a given during the winter season. So we do have to be prepared for that.
And that nobody can predict in advance, except for our weather people like Spencer Christian. But even he has his limits.
Except for Spencer, he can do it.
All right, Henry Hartefeld, air travel industry analyst at Atmosphere Research Group based in San Francisco. Thanks so much for your expertise.
Thank you.
Coming up next, there's a good chance you've seen or heard the Let's Go Brandon comment on social media or live streams. What about it? We'll get into that controversy next.
In commercial break.
All right, everybody, do you have travel plans? Oh, before we get into the next interview, just want to let you know, have you looked outside? Because it might have started sunny and clear today, but it is no longer. Let's just take a look. It's clouding over and darkening up as we speak, and rain is just a few hours away from hitting the Bay Area. In fact, because Spencer Christian is amazing like that, you can't see him, but that's okay. He's busy working. I'm going to shout it over there and see if he could tell us, when does the rain arrive?
Oh, it'll start falling in the North Bay as early as probably between 5 and 6 p.m., light rain. But the heaviest rain will start spreading through the entire region between 8 p.m. and midnight.
All right, so folks, get home before that. And lucky you got a bonus Spencer segment. Didn't even have to wait till the 4, but you should watch the 4. I will be waiting for you on the 4. All right, we'll be back in like a minute.
Eight, 7, 6, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sometimes internet memes makes its way into the real world, and the Let's Go Brandon movement has broken that boundary. Joining us now, Karen North, a professor of digital media at the University of Southern California. She worked for the Clinton administration. Karen, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
What does Let's Go Brandon mean, and where did it originate?
So these are, those little nuances that are sort of fun to understand about the internet and about human nature. What it is like an inside joke, or what I call a dog whistle, and some people in politics do it. You know how a dog whistle is a whistle or a sound that dogs can hear and we cannot. So Let's Go Brandon is a secret coded message to Republicans or conservatives who don't like Joe Biden. What happened was a guy named Brandon won a NASCAR race. And when he won the NASCAR race, the TV stations that were covering it heard what sounded like "Let's Go Brandon" being chanted by the crowd behind them. But when they focused the audio on the crowd, what they heard was that it was F Joe Biden. And so it was such a like inside joke, because some of these memes and some of these sort of coded, like dog whistles are basically like inside jokes. So it became a funny inside joke to the conservatives that now when you say "Let's Go Brandon," it's an anti-Democrat, anti-Joe Biden rallying cry.
All right. Well, look, there have been memes, inside jokes, and insults hurled at previous presidents as well, right? Every president, including former President Trump. When is it harmless, and when does it cross the line? And does this one cross the line?
Well, I mean, that's a matter of, personal opinion. I think that, these many times they don't, they're harmful when there's a victim, when they hurt people. And there have been plenty of these sort of memes or dog whistles that are sort of inside jokes that have that personally attack an individual. When it comes to just a statement against the president, people, in our country, and especially this day and time, like to be polarized, and this is their opportunity to be polarized against this current president. We've certainly in the past few years had a huge increase in the sort of people being drawn to polarizing speech, and the internet and social media helps to amplify the polarization. So it's not even remotely surprising that this has happened. This one's just more clever and more funny.
And that's probably why it's caught fire, right?
Yes. I'll tell you, the one victim is Brandon. This poor guy who's a 27-year-old race car driver who's, I don't follow NASCAR, but who's apparently astonishingly good. And his moment of glory, it's like winning the Oscar and then becoming the butt of jokes, right? Well, this guy won a race and now he's the joke.
Yes. Look, it is certainly everywhere right now. A Southwest pilot is under investigation for allegedly saying that over the intercom, a Republican congressman said it on the House floor. Crowds at college football games have been chanting it. Look, when is it going to fade away?
I mean, these things, usually what happens, two things happen. Either it fades away because it gets boring, or oftentimes when memes happen, if somebody goes too far, then it becomes unfun. Or if somebody's sort of dorky, or like, to the kids, if an adult claims it, it becomes unfun. My kid's favorite example is the one planking, like like getting on your elbows and doing sort of a push-up plank position became a thing on social media, and people were planking all over the place, on the Eiffel Tower, on it, whatever. Yep. And when a congressman or a senator decided
Professor
to plank
Karen
as a
North,
campaign,
let's go ahead and take this conversation over to our streaming platforms. We got to take a break on the air.
Okay.
In commercial break.
We'll take a couple more minutes left. That we're on Facebook Live. We're done with our on-air portion on TV. But I would love for you to finish that thought, though.
Oh, so it's a funny thing. So a member of Congress, I think a senator, decided to plank as part of his campaign, like a PR stunt. And all the kids just thought, well, if some dorky elected official is going to plank as a campaign thing, we're done with it. No more planking. So
does that mean if Democrats start using it and co-opting it as a joke, they'll be done with it?
It all depends on who. It's sort of the joke we have about social media platforms. They're like nightclubs. The cool kids discovered Facebook, and then the worst thing that could happen was what? The uncool kids would discover it?
Yes.
No, their parents and grandparents discovered it. That's the kind of thing that is the death knell of some platforms, not necessarily Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. What does this reflect about where we are, our society and our politics right now?
I mean, to me, again, it's the sad, I mean, I used to work in politics. The sad truth is that we've gone from a community or a culture in the United States of people, whether they're on the left or the right, being forced to and wanting to collaborate at least most of the time, and then fight with each other the 10% of the time. Now people go in and they fight it's all about fighting and winning rather than collaborating and compromising. And this is just an example of how that bleeds out into popular culture.
It's so interesting, that dichotomy, because I could swear if you talk to companies, big companies, they say, we want collaboration. That's what we're all about these days. And probably in your university setting, it's all about collaboration. But then you look at what's happening politically, and it's the opposite.
It is sad. And like I said, when I worked in the, in DC, it was part of the problem, I think, comes from gerrymandering, that what we do is both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, try, when they have their turn, they create, and we're doing it this year, they create safe seats. And every time you create a safe seat for your team, you create a safe seat for the other. And then
we're out of time, but we have heard a lot about the gerrymandering. We'll continue that conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Among the topics we covered today, crowd control after the deadly Travis Scott concert. We'll see you at 4.